Okay, so good morning and assalamu alaikum to all the students and as well as the teachers of Batspa University. My name is Natasha Khan and I am a clinical psychologist at the Nafsology Psychology Center. So today's topic, which is the DSM-5-TR, which was published in 2022. So it is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's the fifth edition and it's only a text revision. So what is the DSM? So it is a book of reference used for the purpose of diagnosing disorders, which are related to mental health, as well as any conditions that are related to deficiencies in the brain. So we use the DSM as a reference point to make a diagnosis. So why do you think it was called DSM-5-TR and not DSM-6? Because when DSM-4, after DSM-4, DSM-5 came out, so it was automatically called DSM-5. Now, one of the main reasons for that is that there weren't enough advances in the field to support the need for creation, revision, and elimination of multiple disorders. So what that means is that there weren't enough new disorders or any development in new disorders that needed to be added or to be deleted from the DSM. So for that reason, instead of calling it DSM-6, they just gave it the name DSM-5-TR, meaning that only the text was updated or revised. So what is new about this revised edition? Meaning what's new about DSM-5-TR? Now it has five new things that were revised in this DSM version. The first is that it has a fully revised text and references. Now what that means is that DSM-5, because it was published in 2013, and now DSM-5-TR is in 2022, so over this whole span of time, there have been multiple new researches, there have been multiple new advances, and all of that data wasn't added. So they have just added new references and they have revised the text, meaning that they have changed the wordings, they have, in the diagnosis, and they've clarified and given further explanations to a lot of diagnostic criterias. Secondly, clarifications to the diagnostic criteria. Now, if you, someone who is familiar with the DSM-5 and who's read it, each diagnosis starts with the first thing, which is the diagnostic criteria. Diagnostic criteria is a list of symptoms which will help you to make a diagnosis, and based on that, a clinician or a psychologist, a therapist, they also understand the severity level of the disorder or the condition of the client or the patient. So the new version has further explained these points. It has given better explanations. It has given better examples, which weren't available in the previous DSM-5, and a lot of its readers, they weren't satisfied with the clarifications given previously. Okay. So now moving on to the third change, which is they have updated the ICD-10 CM codes. Now, because DSM-5 was published in 2013 and ICD was published in 2015, obviously ICD has had published some new codes since then, and they weren't added in DSM-5. So they've added and updated these codes as well. Now, the fourth one, this is not a disorder. These are just self-destructive behaviors that when you're diagnosing a patient or a client, you can add these as secondary diagnosis. When you're making a diagnosis or when you're writing a report about your client, you always have one primary disorder, one main disorder, and then you have one disorder which adds to any kind of self-destructive behavior linked to your patient or your client, which could further help with their whole report in the future. If there is another clinician, if there is another psychologist who wants to read the history of that client, they can refer back through these codes. So these codes, they have been added for suicidal behavior, and they have also been added for non-suicidal self-injury. That is, that there are some situations where the client or the person, the individual, they injure themselves, but they're not suicidal. So these codes are available under the chapter of other conditions that may be a focus of attention. This chapter is specially dedicated to those self-destructive behaviors that do not fulfill the criteria for an official diagnosis. Now, what that means is, in order to give an individual an official diagnosis, they have to fulfill a certain criteria. That is, out of 10 points, they should have at least 4 of them, or they should have at least 5 of those. If they don't have those, then you cannot give them that diagnosis. They do not lie under that spectrum, which is why these are given as separate behaviors, and they've been allocated a separate chapter called other conditions that may be a focus of attention. Now, the fifth change in this DSM-5-TR, they have added a new disorder called the prolonged grief disorder. Now, this disorder is quite famously criticized, and a lot of experienced and experts, clinical psychologists and counseling psychologists and therapists, they're not too happy with this disorder, in the sense that they believe that it didn't need to be added. That's one of the criticisms. But let's go ahead and see what this disorder is. So this was previously known as persistent complex bereavement disorder. It's in the second section of the DSM-5-TR, okay? Now, the reason the name changed is, instead of persistent, they believe that grief is not persistent. Persistent is something when you have those particular symptoms regularly, all the time. They're always there. You never ever are in a state where you don't feel a particular way. But in prolonged grief disorder, the symptoms are more transient. What do you mean by transient? It means they come for a short amount of time and then they go away, and then they come again and then they go away. It's like that, which is why they gave it the name prolonged grief disorder. So this was now it's available in section 2, and because of enough research, and it has enough criteria to fulfill it, and therefore it can be officially diagnosed. So I have a question poll here. The question is that, is grief being pathologized? So we'll do a small poll here, okay? You can answer with a yes or a no. And we'll see that who believes that prolonged grief disorder, it's a disorder that is being pathologized, and who thinks that it's not. By pathologized, it means that who thinks that grief should not be treated as a disorder, meaning someone who loses a loved one, or when a death occurs, and the person who is going through the issues, do you think that their symptoms need to be considered as a disorder or not? So let's go ahead with this poll, question poll. You can answer yes or no. Okay, I'm just waiting for the result, and then I will move on to the next part of the presentation. Okay, so the answer is that 55% of you think that it is being pathologized, and 45% of you think that it hasn't been. So that's what the majority of the readers and the users of the DSM-5-TR, they also think that it is being pathologized. Now, these are some of the criticisms. So criticism of prolonged grief disorder. Now, they say that bereavement, that is, someone who lost a loved one and then they're going through that grief period, that this symptom or this situation, it should not have been removed from the major depressive disorder, because there was a time when bereavement was part of the major depressive disorder, and it was one of the criterias. So you could use it to exclude whether this person is depressed due to someone's loss or because of other reasons. They say that it didn't need to be added as a new disorder. Now, it has been criticized by not only by experts, by clinicians or counseling psychologists or counselors, but even the grievers themselves, because they say that people should be allowed to take any amount of time to process a loss. Because according to prolonged grief disorder, if an adult is still in this grief after 12 months, and if a child is still in the same situation after 6 months, then they should be diagnosed as having prolonged grief disorder. Now, you can imagine a 6 month old or a 12 or 1 year old or a child who has lost, because this disorder is specifically dedicated to people who have lost someone who is close to them, a parent, a sibling, your child, your spouse. And specifically it has to do with those who lose their loved ones due to a violent a death, an accident or something traumatic, which in itself is a traumatic incident, and or through a fatal medical condition. Those people usually go through prolonged grief disorder because they are unable to come out of that trauma, out of that violent situation. So what the criticism is that someone who's already been through such a huge trauma, how is it possible for them to be okay after a year when you've known that person your whole life? It's asking them too much to suddenly become all right after a year, or child to be all right after 6 months. So it exposes them, the griever, it exposes them to unneeded psychiatric medication, first of all, and it sort of insults their dignity of the loss, because you're sort of disrespecting the fact that okay, you have lost someone, so you're not allowed to process it according to your own needs. And also lastly, they say that this disorder is based on minimal research. There were just a handful of researches that were collected, and they used that to make a whole disorder. They should have, there wasn't extensive research done on this at all. Okay. So now let's move on to the three main sections of the DSM. Okay, now DSM is divided into section 1, 2, and 3. Now the most important one is section 2, which is the diagnostic criteria and codes. This consists of all the disorders. It consists of all their diagnostic criteria, their codes. The first section is just an introduction of the DSM. You will have a small, it's dedicated to all the authors and all the psychologists and the psychiatrists that were involved in making this disorder. And then DSM section 1 also has one particular place where it sort of explains how, what are the limitations of using this book for reference purposes in forensic psychology or in forensics court cases. So they say that even though you can use this as a guidance, but it should not be completely used to make a final judgment, that it should only be used for references and for information and knowledge. Now, section 2 consists of all the disorders. So these are really major disorders like neurodevelopmental disorders, which is basically intellectual disorders. They have to do with anyone who has a deficiency in their brain. Um, we have schizophrenia, we have depression, we have bipolar disorders, there's a range of disorders, anxiety disorders, eating disorders. These are all disorders, and personality disorders. These disorders in itself have 5, 6 of disorders of, individually dedicated to a child, an adult, and what kind of backgrounds they come from, and what kind of issues they could have, and what's the onset of the disorder, and all of that. Now, a lot, when I was a student, we used to focus on, schizophrenia and psychotic disorders and depressive disorders and OCD. And we used to kind of, just focus on the big disorders. But I would recommend that you also focus on other mental disorders and additional codes and other conditions that may be a focus of attention. Because when you start practicing, as a psychologist, when you're in the field, then 80% of your patients and your clients are going to be those who are dealing with social issues and emotional issues, parental neglect, child neglect, or all kind of abuses, problems with their marriages, problems with their spouses, their in-laws, or, all of these very daily, day-to-day issues. Those are the ones that will affect your clients the most. You won't find that all of them are coming in with schizophrenia and all of them are coming in with um, eating disorders, although anxiety disorders is one of the disorders that generally everyone has anxiety these days. And because of this anxiety, eventually it leads to depression as well. So my recommendation to you initially, which that I mentioned, was that not only focusing on psychosis, not only focusing on major disorders, but try to be open towards other social issues as well, emotional issues as well, people that are dealing with their day-to-day lives and their daily routines and their daily schedules, work, children, parents. Those are the kind of issues that really affect us as human beings. Okay. So the third section, which is the emerging measures and models. Now, this section is basically helping you out with these different scales that you as a clinician, as a psychologist, you can use them to make a better diagnosis. So if you go to this page, okay, let me just open the page. It has these different questionnaires and it has a scale, okay? So see, you have these scales here, okay? And you can use these scales. You can't see, I wanted to show it to you, but you can't see it because of the green screen. But you can use these scales to make a better diagnosis, okay? And it's for children, it's used for adults, you can use it for intellectual disabilities, and it's a checklist, which it makes it easier for you to really navigate through your clients or your patients, okay? And other than that, the DSM-5 has also provided an additional model, because personality disorders, they play a really vital role in psychology. A lot of the people who come in, they come in with personality disorders. And if you're an expert and you're experienced, you will easily be able to diagnose whether it's a personality disorder, whether it's an anxiety disorder, and how to differentiate between them. And that's something that we will go and I will explain to you further. So each disorder comes with a specific format. Each disorder starts with its diagnostic criteria, which is a list of symptoms from criteria A, B, C, D, E, F, however many criterias there are. It's in the form of bullet points, okay? It gives you symptoms that, and if it's 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6, that means the severity level is high. If it's a 1 or 2, it means it's mild, like that. And then in DSM-5-TR, basically all the other headings, they have been made more easy to understand. They have expanded these criterias, given more examples, explained it more so that the readers can really understand what they mean by these diagnostic criteria. So when you go to diagnostic features, which is the next part of the format, it gives you an explanation with examples of, if this child or if this adult is going through this particular problem, then what in their general life will be happening. For example, if someone is dealing with generalized anxiety disorder, they will have excessive amount of worry. It will be about stuff that don't even need to be worried about. For example, a dentist appointment, or a meeting with their child's teacher, or or a work meeting. Anything, they will turn it into an exaggerated form of worry. So they've given examples to you to help you understand what it is they mean by that symptom. Okay. So that's diagnostic features. It explains to you elaborately. Now, the other heading, which is prevalence, development and course, risk and prognostic factors, culture related diagnostic issues, then you have sex and gender related diagnostic issues. All of these I can sort of explain to you under one umbrella. They basically give you the percentage of people that these disorders are found in Asia, in Middle East, in Europe, in the Americas. It will tell you what kind of percentages are higher in which country. And then it gives you whether it's higher in men or women, or whether it's higher in, in a particular culture, and in particular genes. It could be a trait. It's if it's environmental, if it's temperamental. For example, if a, a child has always had this temperament and he's always been this way, then you could likely, it's a possibility that they might have a personality disorder, and it's very important to also understand which disorder is available, or found in women or men. For example, if you go to the disorder called ADHD or ADD, they say that attention deficit disorder is found highly in women, and ADHD is mostly found in men. It's higher in men. Okay. And then we move on to the functional consequences. Now, this part of the DSM, it helps you to understand what kind of functions in that person's daily life will they be not, are they poor in? They're unable to function in their work life. They're unable to function in their married life. They're unable to function in with their friends. They're unable to function with their children. All of those, that's their functional consequences. For example, if you are highly depressed and you are unable to get up and get ready for work, then those are the functional consequences of a highly severely depressed person, where a simple routine of hygiene in order to go to work is something that they are not able to do. So they tell you that these are the consequences, meaning what's the result if they have these symptoms? What kind of lifestyle do you think they are going to have? Okay. And then we have differential diagnosis. Okay. Now, first of all, diagnostic criteria and diagnostic features, it's a set of signs and symptoms indicating severity levels, which confirms the diagnosis. Okay. And then these symptoms are further elaborated under the headings for a better understanding. Okay. Okay. Now, let's move on to differential diagnosis. Now, according to me, as a psychologist, this is the most important part of the DSM-5, because when you read the DSM, you're going to have a lot of symptoms that are similar to each other. Two disorders might have similar symptoms, or there'll be two disorders which have the same name, but they're put in different chapters. For example, let's say OCD is in the chapter of anxiety disorder, and then OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder, is in the personality disorder. So you would be wondering why these were put in two different chapters. But if you are well read in the differential diagnosis and you understand why, then you get a clearer picture of what the difference is, right? So someone who has OCPD, obsessive compulsive personality disorder. So the main difference between a personality disorder and the other disorders is, one of the main differences is that when you ask their relatives or their close one, they will tell you that they have always been this way, meaning that it started when they turned 12, 13, before early adulthood. Early adulthood is when you turn 18 years. They will always tell you that they've always been like this even when they were 12 or 13. Then the psychologist starts thinking, okay, this might be a personality disorder. But if it's something that started after 18, 19, then you go like, okay, it's an anxiety disorder. So that's how you differentiate. So Differential diagnosis, it's the essential part of each disorder. It guides the practitioners in differentiating overlapping of the symptoms. Okay. Some disorders seem similar to one or more, but differential diagnosis is a tool to assist for avoiding that mistake. Because if you make the wrong diagnosis, that automatically means that you're going to use the wrong treatment and the wrong techniques and all the wrong methods. So reading, gaining knowledge and experience are the only ways to become an expert at differentiating. Okay. So now, what is the importance of diagnosis? So why is DSM-5 for diagnosis? Why is it so important? Okay. Now you have to, because it helps you to use the right treatment methods, and it helps you with appropriate treatment plan. It involves accurate experts. Okay. It recognizes the existence of the symptoms. It's building trust in the community, maintaining reputation in the profession, and it gives the client or the patient dignity and respect. Now, I can give you a small example of this. Now, for example, if you get a client who comes in and that person has, let's say, they have a personality disorder, but you are treating them for an anxiety disorder. Okay. Now, people who have personality disorders, because they have had it longer, it's sort of become their character, and you have to really change the way you speak to them. You have to change your language. You have to change what kind of words you can use and what you can't use, because the sort of language that you use with a client who has OCD and someone who has depression is going to be very different, because the sort of information that you give them is going to immediately trigger their disorder even further. So if you don't diagnose correctly, then you don't use the right treatment methods and you don't use the right language as well. And then because of that, for example, if someone comes to me and I have this, I think that, okay, this person might have ADHD, but if I don't diagnose that earlier, that person is not ever going to be, psychologically assessed. Then we always send them for psychological assessments, right? So when you involve other experts, because like in our center, we have a whole team, So if I have a particular client and I need some assessments to be done, I will send them to my other colleague and they will do the assessments, and then we collectively read the report and go like, okay, whether they have this disorder or not. So, but if you cannot diagnose properly, then that person will never have the opportunity to go through those assessments, and they will never find out that they have that issue, right? So this helps you to involve the right experts. Now, another thing, if your client and if the community does not have trust in your diagnosis, they will not trust mental health. They will not trust psychology as a field. They won't trust us as as therapists, as psychologists, as counselors. And this sort of isn't good for your communities around the world and for our societies as well, because well-being is something that's also an integral part of the whole world, right? So a good diagnosis means trust in the community. It means accurate experts. It means the right kind of treatment plan. Now, and of course, because of that, you will maintain a reputation for the profession. People will believe that, okay, if I have this mental health problem, then this profession is definitely the one to go to, right? And lastly, if a client comes to us for help, and we don't diagnose them properly, what happens is they keep on going from one center to the other, from one clinic to the next, from one psychologist to the other, and nobody's giving them the right answer, right? Because it's just like, when you go to a doctor and the doctor doesn't know what's happening to you, they can't diagnose what the problem is, they will not be able to give you the right medication, and you're just going to be upset and sick and tired, and you will lose trust in that doctor. And also, so this A good diagnosis, it gives the client dignity, the respect. And lastly, I would like to also add that just because diagnosis is important, it doesn't necessarily mean that it you have to make a diagnosis. All clients, they don't need a diagnosis. Some actually come with counseling. They have, like, people come that I'm getting married and I'm nervous about it. I'm having second thoughts about it, or I'm going to a new country and I'm anxious about it. I don't know if I can adapt there or not. Or a child has just started school and they're having a little separation anxiety. So the parent brings them in for counseling. Or let's say you just got married and you're unable to adapt to your new environment. Though these are counseling topics, these are counseling subjects. You cannot give them major diagnosis. But I will say that when those of you who are going to start practicing in UAE, we use ICD-10 codes for references. The DSM codes are not used. You have to use ICD-10. Now, that's something that we're still far behind. I think, that's something that psychologists still need to, work hard on. But they use ICD-10, they do not use these codes. But when you're writing your report, you have to, in your notes, you can write down your own codes and you can write your own disorder from the DSM-5, for your reference. Because we as psychologists, we use this for reference point, right? We use this for diagnosis, we use this for guidance. But just for, for professional purpose, for it to become legal, we use ICD-10. Okay. So that's the importance of diagnosis. Okay. So that's my last slide of the presentation. I'm just going to give a small introduction about our team. We don't have Dr. Yassine working with us still, but the rest of the team still works with us. And we have Ms. Nashwa, we have Ms. Divya, we have Dr. Bilkis, we have Firdaus, and we have two new ones. I'm sorry, but I don't know their names right now, but they have also joined us. And we have DHA and CDA licensed psychologists. Okay. We have we have individual therapy, we have child and adolescent therapy, we have couples therapy, workshop events, and we have psychoeducational and clinical assessments. And we are highly qualified professionals. We speak different languages, and all of us are experts at what we are doing. Everyone does according to what they're tailored for. And that's the end of my presentation for DSM. And we still have time. So if there's any question that anybody would like to ask me, you can go ahead and ask in the chat window, and I will try to give as much answers as I can. So if anyone has any question, they can go ahead and ask me. Okay, so I have a question here. What are the possible risks a client could have if they are misdiagnosed? So this is a really good question, and because I discussed it as well. Now, if you misdiagnose a client, for example, if a lot of adults are being diagnosed with ADHD these days, and for example, and they come to therapy, they've never been diagnosed when they were young, right? So when what happens is, if they had ADHD when they were young, they didn't get diagnosed because nobody knew that that child has ADHD. But now, after getting married, after having children, they suddenly their symptoms start. They're having trouble in their married life, in their work life. So if that child was diagnosed when they were young, a lot could have been easier for that child when they were young. They could have been given the right kind of education, the right kind of resources, and he would have been or she or he would have been more aware of the fact that they have this problem, and they have knowledge of it. So based on that, they make the right decisions. So if a person is not, especially children, if they're not given the right diagnosis, then as an adult, they're unable to function in their work life, in their married lives, and they do all these things that, that gives them anxiety. Basically their anxiety increases. They could get into the bad habit of addiction, substance abuse. They could, even get into gambling addiction, other sexual addictions as adults. If they don't get diagnosed when they're children, as adults, these are all the addictions that they can get into. Even they can even develop depression. And because with ADHD, they don't know how to, you know, because they're so overstimulated, they're so overwhelmed with so many thoughts, they don't know how to, communicate it. So as an adults, they come with exactly the same mind setup. And when you get married and when you're an adult, you have to learn how to communicate, right? So then that's where they start having issues functionally in their lives. So I hope I answered that question. And I have some other questions as well. Students have requested a short advice on facing stage fear. Are there any psychological tools that you suggest? Okay. Now, stage fear, what you can do for stage fear is that collect a couple of your close friends, your in class, and start practicing in front of them. Okay. And first you can start in your own bedroom. Just look at yourself in the mirror and try to speak loudly. And maybe you can even have something already written. If you're nervous about creating, the words from your mouth, why not just write it down and practice in front of your mirror, and even make a video. You can make a video as well. And then you can go back and watch those videos and see, how you did. And once you're comfortable with looking at yourself in the mirror and looking at yourself in the videos, you can collect a couple of your friends and talk in front of them, and even talking in front of your family. Tell your parents to listen to you, tell your siblings to listen to you. And once that is the second level, then the third level is maybe if you can if you really want to test your fear, but when you're on your daily commute, or maybe your neighbor, or any friend of yours that you're not very close to, you can ask them to listen to you. So it's all about practice. Okay, the more you practice, the more fear starts decreasing. And secondly, I love doing this exercise with myself. When I have fear about something, you can say, okay, if I speak in front of the public, what's the worst that could happen? I could slip, I could say the wrong word, I could forget my lines, and then what? Then what will happen? And then what will happen? Because fear is basically anxiety, and anxiety is always worried about what's going to happen in the future, right? So you start asking yourself questions about the future. That, for example, if I slip on the stage, what's going to happen? Somebody will come to help me out. And then what's going to happen? You're going to get up. And then what's going to happen? You're just going to drink maybe a glass of water, take a little, a few seconds, and then start again. That's what's going to happen. Yeah, maybe one or two people will laugh, but the rest are going to feel sad for you, right? That's what's going to happen. So these are the different methods that you can try for stage fear. Okay. There are a lot of questions. Do you believe grief ever goes away? Based on my experience, it's been years, but there will always be a lingering feeling of grief in my mind. Now, that lingering feeling, as long as it's not stopping you from studying, from working, it's not stopping you from being, let's say, if you're a mother, or you're a husband, or you're a sibling, a brother, a sister, whatever role you have in life, if you're doing that while still having that lingering feeling, what is it harming you in any way? Is it causing you any kind of deficiencies in your life? No, because honestly, forgetting a whole person in your life who was there, especially if you've lost someone, and I don't know who you've lost, what kind of grief you have, but if it's something close by, then you don't need to just forget. You can't forget a whole human being, right? But what you can do is that if you have moments where you feel like you need to talk to someone, it's talk to that person. Talk to someone about that person to help you navigate how you feel. And it's okay to have lingering feelings, or um, as long as you are able to function in your daily life. As soon as you feel like you're not able to, you're not functioning adaptively, you're poorly because of this, then that's when you should seek for help. And the help should not be to forget that person. The help should be to help you manage how to function along with that feeling. You understand what I'm saying? Okay. So these days after COVID, many people feel anxious and insecure about themselves. As observed, people opt for wearing masks. So how can those individuals get rid of this? Because I believe that such insecurity and anxiety will cause body disorders later in life and many more issues hindering their daily life. Hmm. Okay. So the thing over here is that because you're talking about another person, first of all, if it's you who's not it's someone else who has decided to wear the mask, right? It's not you who are wearing it. So they are not your responsibility. If as long as they are okay with it and they are functioning in their lives, and it's you're talking about the future, right? Because you feel like they might become insecure and have body disorders or whatever. But that person, if they feel like it's turning into a body disorder, then only can they get help. But other than that, talking about another person that they might develop it, it's not for us to say. It's not for us to say, you shouldn't wear a mask because it's going to cause a disorder. We can't say that because this is not something proved. It hasn't been proved that wearing a mask can cause a body disorder and anxiety. Yes, it might cause OCD of the germs or OCD of a virus, but not necessarily body disorders. Body disorders are something completely different, right? What advice would give someone who might have undiagnosed ADHD and cannot get diagnosed due to financial restraints? Now, we have a lot of online screenings. They're not official assessments, but they're online screenings, and which helps. They're tools that you can use to get a rough idea about your self, if you have ADHD or not. And also, if you feel like you have ADHD as an adult, go ahead and read your symptoms. And maybe talk and go, research on it, read about it. And if you still feel like you have, because ADHD is something that's misdiagnosed a lot, it's overdiagnosed. It doesn't mean that everybody has ADHD. Some people are just generally very hyper, right? Their personalities are like that. So I would suggest that you go online, look for free online screenings. You do have them available, and you do have so many books on ADHD. Go to a library, go to a bookshop, just take a book, read it. Read researches, read articles, because if it's something that, and I understand these tests are quite expensive. Um, but why not reach out to people who maybe they might give you a good offer, or something, maybe they might help you out. So it's always, if you feel like you have it, try to reach out to clinicians and psychologists. Maybe they can help you out with something, because an expert knows ways of how to do it without a financial restraint as well. How do you suggest I help my friend who has anxiety disorder? Um so anxiety disorder is quite a huge umbrella term, right? I don't know what kind of anxiety your friend has, but if they have, because anxiety consists of generalized anxiety disorder, it could be a panic disorder, it could be OCD. So depending on that, let's is only when I can give you an answer. But only one thing I'll tell you, anxiety is about people who are always thinking about the future. They think about, they're apprehensive about events that have not happened yet. Okay. So in that case, you need to understand their, maybe a little background history about what kind of environment that they grew up in, what kind of parents they grew up in. If they grew up in an environment which their parents were always in a hurry and always anxious, and they were clean freaks, or they were organized freaks, then maybe that person has a core belief. Core belief is something that we have, a belief system that has been set when we were children, and then based on those beliefs we grow up and we lead our lives based on those beliefs. So tell your friend to understand what their core beliefs are, what kind of beliefs they have, and then based on that, I think though that will help them figure out what to do with their anxiety disorder. Now panic anxiety, okay, if a patient is misdiagnosed and is then given the wrong medication, and this medication messes the patient up, so this question is for a psychiatrist. This is because clinical psychologists, I don't prescribe medicine. This is not my expertise to give you an answer on. This is something that a psychiatrist can answer you properly with. But it is highly possible for a lot of patients and a lot of clients to be given unnecessary medication that they didn't need in the first place at all. And in that situation, I think they need to first build trust in the with the psychologist, and understand that they need therapy, and that therapy can help them out. If someone else made a mistake, it doesn't mean that the other experts are also going to make that same mistake. And is it possible for the family to sue? This is a legal question. This is something that you have to go to a lawyer and ask. I don't think so. This is something that I can answer on, but I think maybe yes, you can sue. Does your clinic offer internships on BSc psychology graduates? I think this is a question that I will definitely refer to Ms. Nashwa. She's the one responsible for this, and we will get back to you with this question. And it would be lovely to have psychology interns and to get to know you guys. I'll just answer this one last question. I'm sorry if I didn't answer the others. What advice could you give to help if someone is currently experiencing anxiety or depression while being too scared to get checked out? Okay. Now, being too scared, I understand, because clients, human beings, when you come to a psychologist, you come with your whole body and your whole brain, and you come in a very vulnerable state, because that client will discuss with you everything in their life, right from their childhood up till their current life, from their family history, from their from their school histories. And it takes a very courageous person, it takes someone very strong minded to actually come and say that I have this problem and I'm willing to discuss it with you, and I highly respect it, I really respect it. But saying that, it is the duty of a psychologist to have ethical standards. When our client discusses anything with us, we're not there to judge, we're not there to have one side of to be one-sided. We don't have any values when we come to the session. We come there open-minded. We're not, and anything that a client shares with us, it's all confidential. We're not allowed to share it with our with other psychologists by name, or by identities. Identity, it's a secure room, secure place, a session, and you just have to share it with the psychologist on a one-on-one basis. I'm not, I will, it will be on confidential. It will be, I will hear it with respect, with the with the idea that you're in a vulnerable state and you're so courageous to come and share it with me. And that's ethics. You do it without judgment, and you do it without breaking the confidentiality of that person. So we have so many clients, and they might be roaming around the whole world. They might have shared 100 stuff with us, but We do not go around publicizing what's happening in their lives. That's not what psychology is. The whole point of it is to respect their identities. And once you have that, another thing, you need to research on your psychologist. Check out which one you have a chemistry with, which one you would connect with. The one that you find right and you connect with, you will immediately not be scared to, drop your curtain and, share your life experience with. Okay. So I'm going to, stop now with the questions. I hope I've answered enough of them. And I will definitely get back to all of you with your internship questions. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation and the small lecture slash webinar. And if you have any other questions, you can take my number from our center, from Clydeen, our receptionist, and she can willingly give you my number, and you can ask me any other questions as a student, and I'm always there to, I will be available and try to help you out with it. So I'm going to end the presentation now, and thank you so much for coming and joining us. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Ms. Natasha. It was very thoughtful, very knowledgeable. We are so glad all across centers, all the students are here, and the capacity was minimum 100 students. So
Yes,
I
I
had
can
to
see
ask
that.
them to connect from the classrooms so that some of the students can disconnect from their phones. So the
Okay.
ones those are at home, they could connect. So I
Okay.
think majority of the students benefited from the webinar. And on the behalf of students, faculty, being the leader of the department, I'm very grateful for your efforts. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much, Saima. Thank you for organizing it as well. Thank you.
Yeah, goodbye.
Okay, goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.